So I got my hands on a LA County civil grand jury report. And what a civil grand jury is a group of volunteers that are vetted to serve like as a watchdog against lost, waste, theft, or undesirable practices by examining carefully and completely the operations of various government agencies within Los Angeles County. Now, this is the 2001 to 2002 Civil Grand Jury Report, and I'll probably chop these videos up in two parts. So this first part is the criminal background checks at MacLaren. So they'll give a summary of their findings and then recommendations. So the first thing that made me pause was the first sentence that says, in August 2001, MacLaren Children's Center became a state licensed facility and subject to California Department of Social Services licensing requirements, including conduct of criminal background checks for all employees working at the facility who have contact with children. MacLaren had been operating since 1961. This is 2001. And they have found that folks were not being background checked because MacLaren was not operating as a state licensed facility. So then I did a search just on that, like how were they operating without background checks? And basically MacLaren Hall existed for decades without any licensure because government run facilities were not held to the same rules. If the facility was deemed temporary, meaning like only a few days, then you didn't have to go through this licensing process. But what actually happened, instead of kids being there for, a couple of days or a few days, they might have been there for months or a year or more. So it was public pressure that forced these investigations. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, there had been media investigations and lawsuits. So now they have to prepare once they said, okay, MacLaren needs to be a state licensed facility. So back to the report, in June 2001, in preparation for the licensure, MacLaren management began the process of conducting background checks of all employees at the facility. Through this process, MacLaren discovered that 17 employees had previously undisclosed criminal histories considered unacceptable either by CDSS, which is California Department of Social Services, or by a stricter set of standards established by MacLaren management. In addition, 4 individuals voluntarily resigned or transferred during the background checks process. So they had a separate background check process for the employees of LA County Office of Education because MacLaren had a school on site. So out of 30 of those employees selected, because they did a random selection, background checks could be verified for only 10 out of 30. One of those 10 contained a criminal history with no details available. And the LA County Office of Education was not able to provide background check documentation for any of their contract workers working at the school. So the County Office of Education reported that it had been administering its background procedures under a different set of regulations than MacLaren, and reported that they weren't made aware of the new background check policies and procedures implemented at MacLaren until this audit. So to fast forward to its closure, that's why MacLaren closed, because once the licensing requirements were enforced, they couldn't meet the basic standards. They were far below compliance, and the systemic issues that existed were just too deep.